Hello, my name is KY. I have tanked since Trial of the Grand Crusader and Wrath of the Lich King, and I have occasionally dabbled in healing. I have ranked top 2.5% for multiple tanks in the US for Mythic Plus. I have also achieved the rival title in PvP when it was the top 10% of the arena ladder. Wanted to give some of my thoughts on tanking and the tank changes in 11.0.2. I think the largest change that actually affects tanks is actually the CC chain, uh, and how CCs interact with uh, spells that uh, can be kicked. So now uh, any of these spells that can be kicked uh, will no longer be put on CD if they are CC'd and not kicked. They will still be put on CD if they are kicked, uh, which is abilities like Kick, Pummel, Mind Freeze, Spear Hand Strike, things like that. Any CCs like Blinding Sleet, Stormbolt, Kidney Shot, Blinding Light, Fear, these abilities will initially stop the ability from being casted, but after the CC ends, then the NPC will immediately recast the spell. And this makes it much more difficult to control a pack and uh, allows a lot more abilities to go off and puts a lot more responsibility on the DPS to know what can be kicked and what when kicks are on CD so that if they need to use a defensive, they have to use a defensive, uh, especially if an ability is targeting them or if it's AoE and they are just going to take damage. There's a point where simply AoE is just going to kill people, or abilities going off is just going to kill people if all of the kicks are on CD and something is going to go off. If the DPS aren't aware of it, they definitely need to know and to use CDs. So in that regard, the effect that it has on tanks is you can no longer pull as much as you yourself can control the pack. Uh, so I would spec into on my Death Knight, Gorfine's Grasp, A-Bomb Limb, Asphyxiate, and Blinding Sleet, and it gave me a lot of control over a pack. I could stop most things most of the time. It allowed me to pull very large and control mobs very well. And now uh, it feels like the value of CC has significantly been decreased. It still does have value, but it more depends on how quickly a pack can be killed and how well you can keep mobs controlled over longer periods of time. For the tank changes specifically, throughout this, you'll see I'm going through Uldaban on my Death Knight and then You'll see Ruby Life on my warrior. Uh, those are the two tanks that I have gone through and uh, specifically tested the changes with so far. Uh, for DK, the Death Strike change, it doesn't feel like it changes a lot. You can feel the difference a little bit, but I don't think it affects too much on how you use the ability. Uh, personally, if I do double Death Strike, it's mostly for an RP dump if I'm gonna overcap on runic power, uh, just to maximize resource generation. It feels bad to either have no resources or too many resources. Uh, so I don't think, at least right now, I don't think that change affects too much. Uh, on the other side, the blood shield change is quite a bit more noticeable. It feels a lot easier to hit blood shield cap now that it is 50% of your max health instead of your max health. I believe that mastery is going to lose a lot of value. Uh, I- with the more damage you take, uh, you're just going to be hitting that cap a lot easier, and you're probably going to, at least on some pulls, you're gonna actually sit at the cap for a little bit in some situations. Now, for people who are doing probably like the normal raid or world content or uh, lower key levels, maybe my guess would be like 2 through 5 or something like that. Mastery will probably be perfectly fine. Uh, probably still not a great stat, but uh, in terms of the defensive value, after that, it's going to drop off very heavily. You'll be able to just hit your uh, blood shield cap pretty easily, and any blood shield that you would gain over the cap would is now just wasted healing absorb value. Uh, so you generally don't want to go over that. So at higher level content, when you're getting hit hard enough that you would overcap on blood shield, you don't want a lot of mastery so that when you are getting these larger heals from your death strike, then you're going to hopefully hit the 95% mark or the 99% mark and not be going to 101% of your blood shield maximum or any higher than that 105, 110, whatever it may be. The Bone Storm change does feel like a pretty good change. The CDR on Dancing Rune Weapon did feel like it was probably too strong. Having 50 seconds off of Dancing Rune Weapon every time you hit Bone Storm is a lot. Uh, so nerfing that down does uh, seem reasonable. It puts your uh, Bone Shield in a lot easier, a lot more manageable position as well. Makes it probably easier to learn the class as well, and learning to use Bone Storm effectively. Uh, the healing nerf, I don't think matters a lot. Most of it is overhealing anyway. Personally, I've never used the ability for the healing on it. Uh, I think even if they increased it to 5% of your max health, I probably still wouldn't push it for healing. They could probably increase the actual heal and reduce the tick rate of it, and it would still uh, perform the same function as nerfing the heal, uh, just because the way Death Knight plays, you're healing yourself so much with Death Strike that the healing from Bone Storm doesn't account for much of anything in any given pull. It will heal for something, and it isn't completely negligible, but it isn't something that you will press for healing. If for some reason they did want Bone Storm to be a button you pressed for healing, you could nerf the healing even more and triple the tick rate, because the tick rate will be I would guess, would be a bigger factor in how much it actually heals. The tick rate will happen theoretically faster than your global. So if, say, you're pulling 2 packs or 3 packs, whatever it may be, and you're getting meleeed a lot, uh, or maybe it's 1 pack that has a lot of melee mobs, and they're meleeing you a lot. In between your death strikes is when you need the healing from Bone Storm, so you'll need it to be ticking at least once a global or faster. So the amount of healing doesn't have as much of an impact as when it is ticking. And my last thoughts on Death Knight are blood drinking and consumption. Uh, the consumption change is mostly a DPS nerf. Uh, I'm not a particularly effective DPS. Uh, I can push buttons okay, but if you are looking for DPS, I'm not your person. Uh, the defensive value of it, though, uh, Blood Drinker is definitely a bigger defensive nerf than consumption, just because DR is a better defensive tool than healing. Uh, to not take damage is better than to heal damage off. Uh, if you take a hit for your max health, if you have DR, it won't kill you. If you're trying to just heal it off, it will still kill you. For Prot Warrior, most of the changes came in the class tree. The spec tree got a couple of changes, but there don't seem to be largely impactful changes. The change to the capstone node of Ravager, uh, at least for now, seems largely ignorable. Uh, the Battlescarred Veteran change uh, was was implemented before the pre-patch even hit, and then the change to Fight Through the Flames talent. Uh, I will be interested to see if this talent is even taken over damage. Uh, at higher end content, I would guess that there are some places where it might be taken, but at the same time, damage also plays a large role. Even for tanks, uh, getting out more damage can make a pull easier. If you don't need the magic damage reduction to live, you probably won't take the talent. So I'll be interested to see uh, what type of damage we get and how relevant the talent is. Uh, Otherwise, for the buffs to damage and the defensive nerfs, for the most part, they feel fine. I think the most impactful ones, at least that I could feel, are the nerf to Into the Fray's haste buff and the heal to Impending Victory. Otherwise, Prot Warrior, I think, is in a good spot. And honestly, for both Blood DK and Prot Warrior, they feel like they're in a pretty good spot, and the nerfs don't feel like they uh, have a huge impact on the defensive play of tanks. It still feels like you can you don't have to kite mobs. They aren't going to just outright kill you with these changes, and so we'll have to see what happens when the expansion goes live and we can get into Mythic Plus and Heroic and Mythic Raid and see what the damage events actually look like and see how they actually affect the gameplay as the expansion goes live.